East European countries experiencing three stages. Earlier, first version or first generations, we call the Mao Zedong's era. And second one is Deng Xiaoping's era. And now we are in the third stages. The first one is in the Stalin's era. China is a very left-wing, very extreme left-wing. So in that period, China support the Stalin's Soviet regime to press the Poland and Hungary protections in 1956. Maybe many of you don't know idea about that period, but that period, China is a so-called revolutionary bloc member, try to take side of Soviet Union. So no economic trade interest on this region, but see this place as a communist partner. And then when Hungary and Poland have some protections, democratic protection, and China support Khrushchev, use tank, pressed it. So this is the first period of China's relation with this region. It's very tragic recall. A second one, we call the Deng Xiaoping's era. After 1980s, China began reform and opening up. The major goal of that period for China is to attract investment, trade with the Western countries, and then we normalize relation with United States. The Western countries come to China in 1980s very dramatically, and China's economy recovered very quickly. The traditional Stalinist ideological goals disappeared so quickly in 1980s. And then we see in that period, China's relation with Poland, with Hungary, with Yugoslavia, with this region also changed very dramatically. Say, for instance, I remember in the 80s, solidarity of Poland and Mr. Walesa be pressed by General Jaruzelski. But in that period, Deng Xiaoping said, no, we don't want intervention of this region's internal affairs. We just, as an observer, keep the normal relation with this region. So you can say the second period, no strong economic trade relation with this region, but also quit from traditional ideological Stalinist ideology with this region. We keep, as observer, we keep non-intervention policy, try to non-allies relation with both United States and Soviet. And now we are experiencing the third stage. That's what our host mentioned today. Today's China, why we initiative Silk Belt Road initiatives. I think we must understand what China internally happened. In recent years, after China joining WTO, China's economic, social construction very quick. The booming of the whole our economically very fast. If you say Deng Xiaoping's era, China's economy are recovering for a very poor, very, very lower level. And then after joining WTO, China's economy began take off, become a new emerging power in the world. And now China's foreign currency is the largest number in the whole world. And for instance, United States own Chinese money more than 10, how to say English? A lot of money. US earn Chinese money, you see? And we are now the second largest economy in the whole world. There are so many infrastructure teams in labor areas, in Africa, in Asia area, in Latin America. China is number one trade partners. According to UN's number, now there's 193 member countries of United Nations. More than two-thirds of them see China as a number one trade partner, as a number one invested countries. So what I want to say, the East and Central European countries are now the new term for China's economic expansion. We're now not only with this region, we are now already the largest partner of African continent, already largest trade partner of all Asia neighbor countries, already largest trade partner with Germany. Last year, Germany see China as a number one trade partner beyond the United States, beyond Japan. So accumulated capitals, invested abilities, foreign currencies, China needs go further, go globally, including Central East European countries. That's why Chinese government, with this region, initiative so-called 60+1. 60 countries, including Visegrad Group countries, Baltic areas, Balkan countries like Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, so forth. China wants to use the opportunities to supply more financial debt, financial money, and then to get more, trade with these regions, expand China's domestic interest investment to this region. So I guess coming years, you will see more and more Chinese tourists, more and more Chinese infrastructure teams, more and more Chinese students, more and more think tanks come to this region, to Budapest, to Warsaw, to Sofia, to Prague, so forth. That's very important, how we build a new strategic partnership. Now within China, we are discussing how we build the strategic partnership with this region. There must be for Chinese, must be very careful because we know this region have special political sensitivity. In the east part, you border with Russia. On west part, you border with NATO. But for China, we want to simultaneously build strategic partnership both with Russia and with Germany, with NATO. So this is very important topic, as I know, in CAS and Chinese think tanks, how we build a neutral, balancing equilibrium between Russian and NATO. On this hand, you see the Russian. Russian is very important boundary neighbor of China. We have a 4,300 kilometers boundary. It's the longest border. Many years ago, when Chairman Mao in the regime, in the office, China and Soviet Union almost involving the war, a military clash. Both sides built a million army along this border. That's very dangerous. Make Chinese, believe me, if Poland or Czech or Ukraine got some military confrontation with Russia, that will make this region no possibility to build a long, far-reaching economic roadmap. So our policy to Russia is how to harmony with this country without adding military threat. And then when Deng Xiaoping invited Gorbachev to Beijing, we try to make a new deal. And then now you can see China and Russia is a kind of good neighbor. In the boundary between China and Russia, no tanks, no army, no this kind of military build up. That's make our, the military budget can cut heavily for economic investment, for social welfare, for people's daily life. This is very important for Deng Xiaoping's policy to calm down the relation with Russia. So now we think it's very important how to think when we deal with these 16 countries, keep the flexible relation with Russia. But on the other hand, you see the NATO, you see the Germany. Now we good relation with Germany, as I mentioned, as a number one trade partner of Europe. We also have a good relation with Britain, with France, with Italy, with Nordic countries. All these countries also see China's Silk and Bag initiatives as very important. For instance, UK's leader and Merkel of Germany recent years come to China very often to talk how these major European leaders built a partner with China. So I want to say this is very, very important for coming years' cooperation between China and the 16 Central East European countries. If we got some trouble with Russia, if we got some trouble with NATO, these initiatives will not work. Another important thing is that United States, we know that Mr. Trump have a very special personality. It's very uncertain. Recently, when our president got a meeting with Trump, we tried to make some deal, mainly two fields. One is our East Asia countries area, like North Korea, the DPRK, how to keep from North Korea become a nuclear country. Another one is the trade deficits, because according to Mr. Trump, US trade deficits coming from China occupy the 65% of whole US deficit. So he wants to make a big deal with China to make more Americans bank, American trade, investments, and billionaires come to China to let Chinese buy more American products. That's now we are trying to make some big deal, you can say, in coming months and days. This is very busy schedule. In October, Mr. Trump may visit Beijing, and you will see an announcement by President Xi Jinping and Trump how these two countries, largest and second largest economies, make some deal on opening up the domestic markets to invest each other to build so-called economic strategic partnership. So we think this is very weird if Trump and Putin got some problem for us, how to think we build a good partner with this region. So recently in Hamburg of Germany, when G20 countries leaders meet together, I think Putin and Xi Jinping's personal meeting, especially about the Russians' so-called strategic circle, how to make China and Russia coordinately in this region. We don't want to damage Russian interest, but at the same time, we don't want to influence American and Germany and NATO's interest. So this region, I must say, economically, tradely, is rather easy for China. We can do a lot of things. You can do a lot of things. We benefit each other. But the sensitivity is that about the political, about security issue. If, for instance, Ukraine battle continue, if US, Russia got some trouble in NATO's eastern expansion, for China, how we choose to have a Poland, Czech, Budapest, and the Baltic area, what's our position? This is not very certain. In my understanding, in Chinese think tanks debate, what we should have choice. Shall we choose a side or keep it neutral? Immediately, how we have a dialogue with NATO, with Russia, this is very, very important. By the way, I want to say, for China right now, owning economic superpower, but not security and political ones. In the global arenas, we still are newcomer. We prefer sometimes take the free rider, the bus. We don't want to make an initiative. You can see initiatives or the monetary initiatives, but no security, no political initiatives. How to solve this regional Assian group conflicts, Ukraine crisis, Syria refugees, or Crimea political position. China not take position. When Putin come to Beijing, ask our Chinese leaders, say, please support us. We want to take Crimea. Support us in Security Council of UN in the G20 meeting. But we said, no, this is too sensitive to express our position. We prefer, okay, you're both sides. You, NATO, you, United States, make some deal, and then we support it. If you want China to take side of this issue, you can say similar in Ukraine crisis, in Syria crisis, so on and so forth. We say no. So you must know what's the Chinese limitation, what Chinese interest. Right now, our major interest is economic, commercial, trade, rather than the political or security area. And as a leader, in the region, in Asia, in Pacific area, we want to play more constructive role. We want to make the big deal with the United States in, for instance, South China Sea disputes, in proliferation issue, Korean Peninsula. Yes, we can do a lot of things. But in European area, in this tough political security issues, China always keep the distances. We want to say, okay, we're neutral. We want to use both sides to make some consensus, and then we will support it. If you are in a war, if you are very sensitive, for instance, in Ukraine, for China, not very easy to attract China's investment. So this is very important for China. Our major task for the leaders is still very inward-looking. This year, in the end, China will have a new Communist Party. You will see many new faces appeared in political bureaus, in military generals, in foreign affairs military ambassadors rankings. They are very young, many of them born after the 1970s. But for them, the idea about Central Eastern European countries is very ambiguity, not very so clear. Why the Central Asia countries so hate Russia? Why NATO eager to expand its boundary to Bosnia, to Yugoslavia, to Romania, to Poland? Whether both sides, NATO, Germany, UK, United States, can make some, good arrangement, not like this region become a political security sensitivities. That's our major concerns, I must say. I also must admit, for the leaders of Beijing, they have very tough domestic pressures. In China, the pollution is very heavy. You heard the industrial smog. It's very, very heavy. We also have a very big problem of the regional gaps between the coastal area, advanced cities like Shanghai, Guangdong, and Beijing, and the Henan area, which mostly are ethnic groups. The gaps even larger than Africa and America. Within China, we call the three worlds. The first world, second world, and third world within the China. So for leaders, the major goals in coming years is how to decrease the domestic gaps. And last but not least, I think it's also very important to continue our political reform, especially curb the corruption, political corruption. You know that Communist Party always got a very corrupted, especially we got an absolute power. It's always makes some problem. Recent years, Xi Jinping tried very hard to curb the political corruption. So whether he can success to make this political campaign into a institutional reform, make China's Communist Party more attractive, we don't know. Whether he can curb the domestic industrial smog, we have no idea. Whether he can decrease the gap between rich and poor area, we have no idea. But basically, this is number one primary task. And then after we settle down or decrease the domestic pressures, we can have more, rooms, more sources to expand the relation with US, with Japan, with Germany, as well as the 16th Central Eastern European countries. I hope in the future we have more and more personality exchanges with students, with junior researchers, with professors. That's very, very important. I must say, in China, people almost nothing in a sense about this region's political sensitivity, about the construction or kind of the contradiction between Russia and Germany. So in the future, communication, exchange of ideas is so important as a precondition. I hope in the future we'll have more opportunity in Beida, in our campus. Yeah, I finished. In our campus to have a more communication. Thank you. I stop here. I prefer. I no idea what you are interested in China. So maybe in the later on in the response and the commentator, the linkages, we can have more communication. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you. Big applause. If I may, I would add 2 remarks. First of all, please, if you are listening carefully, there were several countries were mentioned, including Germany, France, Great Britain, but even once the European Union was not mentioned. So this is, to my mind, significant and I suppose a fruit for discussion. Point number 2, Professor Wang mentioned that China is preparing a big deal with Mr. Trump or America. I suppose we should dig in and discuss this issue as well, deeply. He mentioned East Asia-Pacific region and South China Sea as a particular regions. However, and this is the last my remark before I will give the floor to Bartosz Kowalski, Professor Wang mentioned several times about Chinese interests. Here I would add another dimension for our debate. At the very beginning of his introduction, he mentioned tanks, Soviet tanks, directing towards actually Warsaw and Budapest at that time. It was 1956. We know from the archives, Chinese, Russian, Polish, and the others